Wolf Theiss Soundshot. Insights and analysis from one of the leading law firms in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe.
Welcome to a new episode of the Wolf Theiss Soundshot. Today we welcome two experts from our cross-regional real estate practice. Peter Oberlechner, one of the leading real estate lawyers in Austria and partner in our Vienna office, and Radka Neničková, counsel and specialist for our real estate development and projects advisory in Prague. Together, we discuss accelerating trends and paradigm shifts in the CEE and how repurposing of real estate can meet current challenges the industry is facing. So hi Radka, hi Peter, welcome to the Soundshot.
Hello.
Hi Krista.
It's good to have you on the show today. Actually, Peter, I should be saying it's good to have you back because we spoke on a similar topic about half a year ago. Isn't that right?
That's absolutely right. The topic is kind of a sequel to what we discussed.
In that episode, we covered how COVID-19 was impacting the real estate market and what kind of trends could be expected. And I thought today we could focus on a tool that would help add value to those struggling asset classes, and that is namely repurposing of real estate. So, Peter, can you give us a brief overview? What is repurposing and why would we need it in today's market?
Well, I think just to tie into the episode that we had on the impacts of COVID on the real estate markets, I would say there is two different schools of thought how to deal with assets that have become problematic, not only on grounds of COVID, as I should say, but also on grounds of other market developments. One school of thought is that, many people are still holding out and waiting for things to come back to normal as they were before the crisis. For instance, as regards hotels, people that are convinced that there will be again strong demand for certain types of hotel assets the way it was before the COVID crisis, or as regards retail assets, people who think that shoppers will come back, and certainly that is the case, but still we're, I would say, still facing a different reality now. The other school of thought is that it's about time to think of alternative uses for assets that have become problematic as a consequence of the COVID crisis, but also on grounds of other factors, such as, for instance, the shift of people to shop online rather than going to brick and mortar stores. And repurposing of real estate is indeed a strategy that can help to overcome current problems. What is this about, this repurposing of real estate? Quite simple. It is how the name says, you just try to find an alternative use that makes sense for real estate that you hold, but that is no longer in demand as it was before, which would, for instance, mean to repurpose hotels, urban hotels, into city apartments, to give an example. Or when you think of retail assets that have become problematic, to think of alternative uses such as converting them into just to give another example, into a mix of a medical facility, combine it with some offices and have some retail being left in there, but no longer the shopping mall serving as an exclusive retail facility. That is what repurposing basically is about. And what we see is that on grounds of the effects of the COVID crisis, but also on grounds of the kind of natural evolution of property markets, I would say there is an increasing demand for repurposing of real estate. People who hold real estate are actively trying to find new and better uses for the real estate that they have.
Interesting. Thanks for the overview. So, if we're looking at the market today, specifically in the CEE, do either of you see this happening?
Yeah, if I may, I absolutely agree to what Peter said, that actually there are many factors, not only pandemics. And we've already seen this shift even before when, for example, retail parks were transformed to, let's call it like entertainment and social centers, including cinemas, fitness in much bigger extent than before, or different entertainment places, for example, for kids. So this is definitely the trend which was accelerated by the current situation. And yeah, it definitely it's going on, especially in cities where construction is quite saturated. So there are not so many available land plots or even buildings in the city center. So definitely the owners have two possibilities: either to sell such property, and for example, especially in Prague, this would be an option which would be preferable for many investors, because there are not so many investment possibilities. Or the current owners may definitely try to change the use of such buildings into something else. So we can definitely see this trend, although as Peter said, still there are many entities who are currently just waiting what the next days will bring.
Do you see specific asset classes making the move first?
Yeah, for example, in Czech Republic, a transformation or a change from hotels into residential buildings is definitely one of the topics, even for some municipalities which actually dismissed within last year their flats. So they are now trying to reshape their portfolio of, let's say, social flats again. So they are trying to change to transform hotels into such a residential buildings. So this may be definitely one case. And what actually is new, I would say, and what was brought by the current situation, what we are facing now, is really a huge increase in demand for residential housing, which was not known before. And I would say that the pandemics definitely brought a change, not only to the use of the real estate property, but also to mind of Czech people who are switching from ownership mode to just a rental mode. There are interesting surveys, for example, confirming that nowadays it may be much cheaper to rent an apartment than to own it subject to mortgage, so then pay a mortgage for such an apartment. So this may be also a very important factor which may influence the whole situation and future trends in this area.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing now is only the beginning of an increased trend that we will see that is, I would say, fueled by various factors. One clearly is, as has been mentioned repeatedly, the pandemics and its aftermath that I would expect to be more substantial than what the current signs at the wall show. The other thing is other market developments that have been going on anyhow. But the third, I would say, the third factor that stimulates a repurposing of real estate is the fact that to an increasing extent in our cities, new construction land is becoming a scarce resource and construction prices are steeply going up. So both these factors combined probably with ecological aspects will lead to an increasing demand for repurposing of existing real estate rather than tearing things down, looking for new places to expand, etc., etc. So it is the resources that are available that point into the direction that repurposing will become way more important than it currently is. Of course, what we see basically throughout Central and Eastern Europe is that there is a maze of legal regulations to be obeyed for repurposing of real estate that makes it, I would say, very, very difficult for investors and for developers to clearly judge whether or not it's possible, this is possible at all, and which costs are precisely involved. And proceedings are very often lengthy and cumbersome. So there is a whole lot of, I would say, legal obstacles to to be overcome for the repurposing of real estate.
It's good that you mentioned this. It's what I wanted to move to next. It sounds like there are lots of reasons to repurpose, but what would be some of the obstacles?
Mhm. I mean, as may be known, Wolf Theiss conducted a survey throughout all our countries, all the 13 countries in which the firm is present, to find out what the legal requirements and the prerequisites for repurposing is. What this survey showed is that within a given zoning of land, a repurposing, and when this zoning is not touched by repurposing projects, it's generally possible to do a repurposing, and the consequences and the prerequisites can be not always without problems, but they can be adjudged and they can be seen. However, things become really tricky when a repurposing of real estate shall take place that is outside the scope of given zoning requirements. And these zoning requirements depend on clearly, I mean, they depend on a country's legislation, they depend on the municipalities. In the case of Austria, for instance, they also depend on the legal prerequisites of our 9 federal states, basically. And this then is a really cumbersome exercise because owners and developers are always dependent, I would say, on rather unclear legal processes to find out whether or not a repurposing is still possible because the zoning will have to be changed. And this is an act of authority. Basically, in all the states where Wolf Theiss operates, there is no legal claim for such change of a zoning. So owners and developers will depend on basically lengthy political processes and will depend on the goodwill of authorities at the end of the day to make a repurposing project possible or not. I would consider this as a major stumbling block for repurposing and generally as something where a bit more flexibility in difficult times might be required to stimulate the economy.
I absolutely agree to what was said by Peter, and I would just add that it definitely depends on each specific case. Because there are, for example, current cases in the Czech Republic in Prague where someone wanted to change the hotel into the residential project. However, the construction costs were so huge that they simply decided not to proceed with that. But in terms of whether the situation will change or whether it will simply return to the status how it was before, I would say that any and all crises never basically lead to the exactly same situation as it was before. But really, what the situation exactly will be, it's the question of the future, and only the future will bring us the right answer to that.
Any projections about what it might look like and what some of the benefits would be of repurposing now?
Well, I think it would be advisable to actively face the challenges of the present and to actively confront the requirements of the future. And I think the future was always different than the past was. So probably people who are considering a repurposing of real estate should be encouraged to look into that more deeply. I think that for urban development, it's always better to have properties used in an optimum way rather than having them sit empty or vacant over an extended period of time. So I think probably urban planning authorities and provincial bodies should be encouraged to facilitate a repurposing and a redevelopment of existing real estate, because I think it's, for various reasons, it's the better option also for urban planning. Thirdly, I think that as regards the future of development of real estate, what the recent experiences have shown that clearly, and this ties into what Radka said before, for the example of offices, there is need to develop real estate to be more flexible to fulfill the requirements of the future, and to consider when planning real estate and when developing real estate that the current or the use that the real estate is kind of tailored for the time being might not be its final destination at the end of the day. And I think to develop real estate in a way that it is more flexible to suit alternative uses as well is something that is positive from an ecological viewpoint, positive from a development point of view, positive in terms of resources consumption, and positive in view of an optimization of the use of economical resources. So I think there is much that speaks for a more flexible development of real estate in future also.
Perfect. And I'd like to just at this point say thank you to you, Radka and Peter, for joining us today on the Soundshot.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Wolf Theiss Soundshot. For more information, you can contact us via email at soundshot@wolftheiss.com or visit our website at www.wolftheiss.com. You can also follow us here to receive further updates on developments in law and business from one of the leading law firms in Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe.